Next in our panel is Dr. Jennifer Doering. And Dr. Doering is a alumna of the Robert Wood Johnson Nurse Faculty Scholars Program, where I first met her. And I watched her pitch at a conference there and was immensely impressed. And so I'm pleased to have her here with us today. She's an associate professor, and it's listed on the program she's the executive committee chair, but I know that she was recently appointed the associate dean for academic affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee College of Nursing. And adding to that list of credentials, she's also the co-creator of the Sleep Pod. And so infant sleep pod, I must be correct about that. And so I bring her to the podium so she can share her thoughts about her journey on the development of the infant sleep pod, and also about strategies of protecting what's most valuable to many academicians, which is your intellectual property. So.
Thank you, Ron, for that lovely introduction. These are tough acts to follow, and so I'm going to dig in. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. But if you all want to just stand up, and if you want to stand while I talk, I can't, it's really hard for me to sit for so long. And, and I appreciate the packed schedule because these stories that we're hearing are amazing. So please feel free. If you all want to stand up and stretch and listen, that's great with me. All right, so my solution was born out of my research. And the question comes from my qualitative interviews with mothers after having their babies. I interviewed dozens of mothers for three grounded theory studies, and also measured their sleep postpartum in over 120 women who were on Medicaid. And at the end of these interviews, a lot of women would say to me, "So I know I shouldn't sleep with my baby," that's what they all tell me, "but I'm going to do it anyway. What advice do you have for me to do it more safely?" And the answer is none, because we haven't explored that area of science. And so I felt like I had handcuffs on, and I had to toe the line of the American Academy of Pediatrics safe sleep policy, because that is the standard of care. And I'm not against that. I'm in a very controversial product space, just to share with you. So there is a body that believes you should always sleep with your baby, and that is actually safer. And there's a body that believes you should never sleep with your baby, and that is always safer. And I'm constructing my program of research right smack in the middle, and also without judgment, because it gets you then thinking out of the box, as people have talked about. I'm conducting right now a baby box study in Wisconsin, and we're asking the question, mark all the places your baby slept at night this past week. And these are all the places that they're mentioning. I'm not seeing a whole lot of firm and flat, safe, separate, dedicated sleep spaces that the American Academy of Pediatrics mentions. And so the reality we know from research and borne out in my study is that babies sleep multiple places each night, and we've got to innovate in this product space. So it all comes down to framing the problem. You've heard a lot of really good examples today about how to clearly and succinctly frame this problem. How I frame it depends on who I'm talking to. And so I might share things like, babies are dying at a rate of more than 600 per year from suffocation and strangulation in bed. We also have mothers and fathers who hear many different safety messages. They're worried, they're scared, they're sleep deprived. And there's a lot of confusion because parents hear things from, their consumer groups, their parent groups, their Facebook parent groups that they're in, industry and healthcare professionals, and they're just simply confused and they don't know what to pay attention to. And it generates a lot of worry and anxiety. And then generally, we know that bed sharing is increasing, suffocation in bed is increasing, and we know that current products don't meet parents' needs because they hack those products. They change the products to better meet those needs. And I've never seen a parent change a product in a way that made the product safer. Invariably, they make the product less safe, even despite the fact that they are very well intentioned in what they're trying to do. So I'm not going to talk a lot about teams because I'm also going to tell you about my failures. And my failures is that right now, my team is my partner. Despite the fact that we've been doing this for many years now, I think we started probably in about 2011, 2010, is back when we started quietly designing this concept. And I say quiet because it's really important to stay quiet when you do have an idea before you know and figure out who it is you can trust. So literally 1 to 2 years went by before we started talking about it, and we just design. What should it do? What would it look like? My partner, who is partner professionally in business and personally, I came home frustrated from my research interviews saying, I don't know what to tell these mothers. And he says, well, what would I have to do? What would it have to look like? And we literally just went from there, and we built the design. We also applied, so he's a director of maintenance on corporate jets. So he has taught me more about aviation safety than I ever thought I would know. And they have a model that I think, and I have applied to the baby sleep space. And so they have this balanced model of a plane crashes, we look at what happens, and then we make changes to predict if that might happen in the future, and it's a nice balanced approach where we learn from our mistakes. We all know that a jumbo jet filled with people dies every day in our healthcare system due to medical errors, and that's a conservative estimate. The aviation, maritime, and railway industries have figured it out, and I think we've got a lot to learn from them. And no, humans are not machines, but they do exist in complex environments. And this model has learned how to adapt to ever-changing weather, unpredictable events, lightning strikes, bird strikes, all of these things, and still keep people in that metal tube alive when the wings fall off, which hopefully never happens. So what I'm trying to do is to move the needle to the right with regards to creating a more balanced approach and approaches that are more predictive of improving sleep safety with babies. Because our current technologies in the consumer marketplace, and I'm talking about consumer marketplace. You've heard a lot about the medical device, and this is sort of a nice counterpoint, is that the outlet monitor, and I met the owners of that company a few years ago. It's a little sock with sensors in it, and it measures the baby's I think heart rate and oxygen saturation and temperature. And it's great, but I, as a nurse, asked the question, kind of a Florence Nightingale question, why do we wait until the baby stops breathing to detect that there's a problem? Why not do an upstream intervention, monitor the environment around the baby, and alert the parents when a hazard that could result in death occurs? So that's my approach, is put the patient in the right environment, and you'll see change in health. So I'm not going to go into this, but really the whole purpose of it is to control risk, harm reduction. And we have literally been working for hundreds of years, as I discovered in doing this research, to try to keep babies safe in bed. This is the Arcuscio. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's from Italy. And this is a device that was placed under the bedclothes in, quote, peasant families by nurses hired by or employed by the Catholic Church in the 1800s in Florence. And then you pull the bedclothes up over it, and the baby stays safe underneath it. Look at it, structural passive protection. And what's interesting is it says that under pain of excommunication, if nurses didn't do this, they could be excommunicated and didn't provide parents with these things. So we've gone completely the opposite end of the pendulum, saying never sleep with your baby. It's kind of interesting. We've been trying to work on this problem for a long time. And does anybody know what those little half moon cutouts are for? The breast. So they can breastfeed from either side. Isn't that a great invention? Things you don't think about, but you're like, yeah, duh. All right, so I've got my story to tell, but I want to step back really quick because I don't want to miss this point because I might get a little short on time. Your role when you're thinking about sharing an idea really matters, and you might inhabit multiple roles. And so I'm going to go through really quickly some key points. Some of the points have been hit upon, and I won't touch upon those. But what everyone knows before sharing an idea is you need to know your rights and responsibilities. Asking these questions, what constitutes a public disclosure? Because if you disclose something publicly, you can't protect it thereafter. What does not meet the threshold of a public disclosure? If you can talk about things in class, you can talk about things in a laboratory. It's a protected space, but you have to know what's protected and what's not. Presenting at a conference is not a protected space, and that constitutes a public disclosure. Asking about NDAs. I haven't heard a lot talked about non-disclosure agreements. These are very critical for forming trusting partnerships and relationships. And so you have somebody sign an NDA, which you can get from your tech transfer company in any number of places, before you talk about your invention with a company, with a person. I've got just a stack of NDAs before we had applied for patents. And understand the terms of the NDAs. They're much like, when you click the agree to terms, it's just a lot of lingo, but you need to understand that even NDAs can expire. It's very easy to network with people to learn these rules without disclosing your idea. So I encourage you to do that. You can just use, I've got an idea for making foxes cuter. Before I tell you what it is, what should I do? Who should I not talk to? So you can learn from others. And then the key is document everything. Get your notebook out, and anytime you have an idea, and you write it down, and you date it, and you date who had the idea. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as we get to the faculty and student role. I can't emphasize that enough. So the faculty role, we've learned that the time horizon and what constitutes products may or may not align with your goals around entrepreneurship, depending on the environment, the academic environment that you're in. And similarly, the different funding mechanisms may also, raise the bar or lower the bar. So I work with engineers, and they're all like, I want the patent. And I'm like, I want the paper, And they don't care about the paper at all. So I can write out the wazoo, and they put my name on it, but I don't care, because they just have different metrics of what counts. And then when you're a faculty in really any time, ask who owns the IP, and especially if you leave that institution, what happens after that point? Because if you leave, and this is as a student as well, sometimes you can negotiate terms about, well, what happens if I return, and what happens if this gets licensed? And then do be aware that if you sign on for development funding, you might be giving away your rights for not just that invention, but every other derived invention from that. So same with a student. When you accept money for development, do understand what you're giving away. Are you giving it away equity, inventorship? What resources do you gain? Because it's not just what you're giving away, but also what you're gaining, so you can fully embrace and use those resources. And talk with your faculty and get faculty input from people who have gone down this route. The other piece is make sure you're with faculty you trust, because I have seen instances where ideas are stolen from students by faculty, and that students also take things and go outside. So again, NDAs, figuring out who you can trust, and before you disclose your idea, be very aware. And also being aware of the threshold for inventorship is key. This is where you find it. It's on the U.S. Patent Trade Office website. And because when it comes down to if you can create a patent out of this, every single claim has to be identified with a person, and that co-inventor then is entitled to royalties. And if that co-inventor finds out that you've gone for a patent and have not put them on it, they can go to the USPTO, file a claim, and it can actually dissolve your patent. So it's really, really important that you understand the rules of the game before you start to play. Okay, so what if you're an employee? We have a lot of DNP students who are coming in with great ideas, but they work in healthcare systems, and they generated those ideas from healthcare systems. And so if you did that, does your healthcare system have a policy? A lot of nurses don't even know. I was actually just talking with a grad student just this past week. What's the policy? Well, I don't want to ask because I don't even want to give them the idea that I'm thinking about it. Well, that's good. You're skeptical. I like that. So let me ask somebody who's working in that healthcare system in management, hey, what's that policy? And sure enough, within 5 minutes, I had it. And she's like, I didn't even know this existed. And so she was going to go out and create a company and go down this road, but she has to figure out, having multiple roles as a student and an employee, what's the priority? Let's see. Also, sometimes systems, and we've heard about this, if 1 in 10 succeed, Well, if it fails, are you then free to take it out and go work on it yourself? Because you may have the option to do that. And, so something might die, but again, if somebody lets it go and they sign away, they stop, the tech transfer company suspends its rights, you may be able to come back to something if the timing works out, if it hasn't been disclosed. All right, so when you have multiple roles, again, determining which role takes the priority based on the institutions that you're working with, explore the limitations and opportunities, and just seek legal counsel when needed, and or business mentorship. Anytime that you can go to your small business development center and say, can I have a consultation? They often offer free consultations, and it can be quite valuable for getting referrals to lawyers who they trust and learning what your rights and responsibilities are. So with that, I'd like to go back to my story. So in 2012, and I came out with the idea, my associate dean for research talked to the engineering associate dean for research. We brought some faculty together and said, who wants to work with me? Here's an idea. So they said, now stop talking about it. You kind of make these little bit of mistakes. And so, now here's how you move forward. You got to file a disclosure. So I filed a disclosure. They said, go for funding. I wrote a catalyst grant for some development funding for some phase 0. Let's go try to make this. We actually made it with a group of engineering students in their senior year. Bring together different engineering students, try to start making it. It was a very cost-effective way just to start. What material would it be made of? What shape would it take? How would you put the sensors in? How expensive are the sensors? Really, really basic things. And the development funding was really to say, let's assess the patentability. Is it novel, non-obvious, all those important things. So we applied for a provisional patent while we had that development funding, and that initiated that 1-year timeline that you have to then convert it to a utility patent. So do that. Yes, it gives you some freedom then to start talking about it, some protection, but be ready that that's going to be a year that when the end comes, there's a lot of tough decisions to make. It also gave us an initial market assessment. We applied for follow-on funding and then secured a $25,000 economic development grant to learn the lean startup method, which is what a lot of us have been talking about to our idea. So the lean startup method, or lean launch, it's in the I-Core model. It may be kind of talked about a different thing, but it's essentially what prior presenter talked about. Is it Stephen? Where you don't even need your idea, really. Just go out and find out who are your customers? What do they think about it? What is your value proposition? Is there a market for it? Are there distribution channels that you could actually get into? And so it's a go or no-go decision at the end of this experience. And we did over 100 interviews with, quote, customers. Customers are anybody in your business model. Customers are baby manufacturers. They're nurses, they're doctors, they're parents, of course, but they're parents of varying types. I interviewed parents who always sleep with their baby, parents who would never sleep with their baby, and everybody in between to start to understand what are your customer segments potentially. And we also launched our LLC because at the point when I got this economic development grant, it needed to leave the university or it became a conflict of interest. And it also wasn't money that had the rules that it would fund my salary. So then that created the disclosures and the conflict management plan and all of that. So I launched my LLC and we secured a physical space because as a nurse, I didn't have the ability to have a lab that I could do prototyping in. That was more reserved for the engineers. And at that point, I had changed engineers to move to the Milwaukee School of Engineering and worked with a couple great engineers there. We needed space to actually just build because my co-inventor is a builder. And we needed to build a minimum viable product, which is also one of those things that you want is what is the least complex product that you can get into the marketplace and or finish de-risking your business plan. So I also started to learn about what is this product space. You go to Babies R Us and you look at all the different products out there and you say what materials, what's inside, and you take them apart. and try to learn what the parents' pains and gains are using these products. And so there are in-bed sleepers, but we were improving dramatically on them because they provided 180 degrees of protection. We were looking at 360 degrees of protection. And as you can see, a lot of parents, their babies sleep in car seats. And in babies less than 4 months of age, their temporomandibular joint is not formed, and that joint is what keeps your airway open when your head is in a flexed position. And so when 90% of babies who die of a sleep-related cause are less than 4 months of age. So 90% of babies who die are less than 4 months of age. And so this is information that a lot of people don't know, but it goes into creating your product design. And so my slides aren't matching because I'm actually sharing with you the slides that I did as a part of my Idea Advance back in 2014, 2015. This is about simplifying the message. I can talk to academics all day long about the different mechanisms and such, but really, what did parents worry about and what did they need? And your customer interviews, which only last 10 or 15 minutes each, get down into that. So parents said, I was afraid of the baby rolling off the bed. So what does the product have to do? It has to keep the baby contained in a space. It seems simple, but it's simplifying the research process in a way to meet your consumers' needs. So we were providing peace of mind to worried parents. This is what we kind of synthesized down to, and having a smart or a sensored pod meant that we had a product that could watch over your baby so you can sleep. So again, the pain of the parents not being able to sleep or wanting to be close to their baby, monitor their baby, and being worried about rolling over or a pillow impinging on them. All those worries could be allayed if we have the right design and technology. And so this is a picture of a very early AutoCAD version that we put together, and some quotes from parents. So we started prototyping. We thought about ABS plastic, and we built a prototype. We thought about polyurethane foam, like, ooh, this might be interesting. And then we realized when you dig into this and you have an interview with a manufacturer of polyurethane foam, that it cost $25,000 just to create the mold to create one prototype. So we never got past an engineering schematic. And so our engineers would create things in SolidWorks, in AutoCAD. And then in the next slide here, we actually created a 3D printed scaled down version. And so this is not polyurethane foam, but it's what it would kind of look like if we created it and then integrated like netting and all of that stuff into it. And we did a lot of prototyping of electronics in the basement. And I have a picture of my cat here because he got really into it as well. But this is the down and this is what you do, is you just experiment and you say, is this going to work or not going to work? This is that iterative process that everyone goes through. So when we established our LLC and I said we needed a space to prototype, we really needed a space. We have an industrial machine shop. We are now in our 4th year of that lease, and we just brought in our 3rd CNC machine. A CNC machine is a machine that takes raw metal or plastic and turns out a finished product. And so we are not making the infant sleep pod. That's the failure. We're not making it because we need to license it out, because I'm not going to become a baby manufacturer. I would have to leave my job, and I'll go into the sort of the details around that decision making. But we're actually machining for various industries because that is what my partner's dream is to do. And so this has afforded us another opportunity. So here are early prototypes. This is the skeleton. We had, water jet cutting out of the plastic and holding these together in a way. And how do you glue them? And is the glue safe? And then we hired a seamstress to come in and last minute before we went to the trade show, which I'll talk about, create a covering for this. And it gets real. And you put a lot of hours, and this is all after work kind of stuff. But it's also a lot of fun, and it's a very creative process. So ultimately, once we got some pictures taken, we created the first Smart Alert infant sleeper. And got some pictures with a mom. It's actually an emergency room physician. You wouldn't believe how many physicians sleep with their babies. And they just don't tell anybody. But again, they're very interested in, how do I do this safely? we needed to develop the product features in order to file the patents. So we have about passive protections. You can put 50 pounds of weight on this. The weight distributes in a way that doesn't crush the baby. It's for babies less than 6 months of age, and the active protections or sensors alert the parent before the baby is injured or hurt that there may be a problem. And they're also, the whole algorithm is modified so that it minimizes false alarms. Because one thing we heard is that parents feel like they're getting PTSD when when the cardiorespiratory monitors go off and they think that the baby's dying. And so then they just turn them off. So this is more of a parent-related thing that we would show. There's design features, and then what value the parent would assign to that with regards to the physical design and also the technology. And these are from, again, my Idea Advance. This is from that lean startup work. And that we identified 3 primary customer segments. So this is all derived from our interviews. And this is that process that you go through when you're doing this type of really early work with an idea. We also had the money to then have a really amazing consultation with world-class safety experts. We brought our prototype to them. Hi, Joaquin. We brought our prototype to them and we said, what do you think? And we had this wonderful 2-hour consultation with the people that literally test all the infant sleep products. There's third-party testing that has to occur. It's kind of like the FDA for consumer products, if you will. And so it was just absolutely wonderful to be able to sit down. And we said, well, we kind of want to sell this without sensors for lower cost, and we want to sell it with sensors for higher cost, more, we could luxurize it, with bells and whistles and make it really high cost and also mass market low cost and everything in between. And they said no. They said, we didn't think this would be a good idea when you came in, but the way that you've explained it and how it works, we actually recommend that you don't sell it without sensors ever. And there's rationale around that, but getting that kind of, here's the line, if you want to be safe in the industry, this is what you've got to do, fundamentally can change your business plan and inform it in a really important manner. And so I took a workshop or a whole course on consumer product safety regulations, something you got to know if you're going to create a consumer product. And you learn how to design products for foreseeable use and misuse. You design it so that it encourages parents to naturally use it correctly, and it frustrates them if they use it incorrectly. We also attended, and this should have happened a lot sooner, years before, the leading trade show for this product space. So that's the ABC Kids Expo in Las Vegas. They had an invention connection. You bring your idea, and for a low cost, all the CEOs and VPs of the manufacturers walk through, and they just give you advice. They say, you can't sell that for more than $99, and if you can't make that profit margin work for that, not going to happen. Well, we want to manufacture it in the United States. Not going to happen. You learn that kind of stuff, that hard, like, oh, okay. And it informs you to say, can we really do this? Am I going to quit my job and become a baby manufacturer or not? Or are we going to find a way to license it out? This is just a Gantt table of our timeline. It was ideal, but just, again, things that you put together to help inform your plan and convince people to give you money. And where we're at right now is that we needed follow-on funding to launch production. And so when Ron saw me talk, we were about to launch a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. And we had a really amazing failed crowdfunding campaign. We put a lot of energy and resources into it, and it utterly failed. We were going to build 5,000 units. That was great, and it didn't work. So it's back to the drawing board. So we started to talk with investors. We started to do that, exploring, would this work? What is it going to take? Because that's really what we would need. And we had to figure out how much we would need. So we looked at we talked about this total available market. What is realistic? We talked about market potential. You cannot find data on sales just about anywhere except on the recalls. So you go to Consumer Product Safety Commission, you find out what the recalls, and so we did sort of a backdoor approach where we found out what potential sales could be by looking at the products that had been recalled and had hurt babies. I actually met the owner of the Simplicity Bassinet. It was interesting. And so you put together your revenue model. This is all a part of your business canvas pathway model. And so you look at the regulatory pathway. What is it going to take? What kind of resources do you need in your business plan? And I'm speeding along here because I know I'm running out of time. And then you put together, perfect. And then you put together your timeline and you move on. And you make a go, no-go decision. And so we needed $400,000. And so we would have to find investors for a first round and go that direction. We decided we're not going to do that. We're going to try to cultivate the relationships with the industry partners and get somebody to license this technology. Because I have like 15 other ideas, and I also want to cultivate innovation and entrepreneurial awareness in my discipline, in my university. And that's where I see my role going. And so we've heard several different perspectives. You know, I'm doing it because it's my passion and I want to change the world. I sold a company because I want to continue my research. I'm doing this because I have other ideas and I want to cultivate. There's no right or wrong way. It's what way is right for you. And so we have 3 patents awarded. We're seeking a company to license some or all of the technology. And we do have enough protection in our patents that any product that wants to make their product smart and include anything that includes environmental monitoring with sensors will have to license from us because they'll infringe upon our patents. So we're like, yeah. So I want to end by just saying, in nursing we have workarounds. A workaround is an action that's performed to circumvent a block in workflow. Workarounds are often viewed negatively. They're seen as deviations of protocol, and it is sort of fundamentally a reframing that I think needs to occur, because there's even an article that talks about workarounds being unethical. And so that can really stymie innovation, and I think we got to call that on the line. Because I think that a workaround is actually praxis. It is practice in action, and that nursing has so much low-hanging fruit for innovation. Anytime you use medical tape and tongue depressors to adapt a patient to a technology or adapt the technology to a patient, that is an innovation. And if you're telling another nurse about it, that's an innovation that you are passing down. And that is ripe for harnessing for commercialization. And so I think that actually, if we think about workarounds as innovations, we will better be able to harness what is nursing knowledge. And we've had some great examples today of, I didn't see in any of yours, there was no diagnoses. There was nothing medical about it. It was harnessing nursing knowledge, and it is so empowering. And I really look forward to seeing how all of you grow. Happy Nurses Week.
All right, I was telling Dr. Doering, don't go forward, because I'm going to have the panelists come up to the front so that we can have a session of some question and answers. Or in my era, I used to watch Phil Donahue, so this is my chance to walk around with the microphone, or for those who might be after the 80s, Oprah-esque, if you will. This is where you get to pick the brains of the experts, and I really would like to leverage the expertise that's in this room. I mean, these are the thought leaders in our field, and it comes across in a continuum of learning. And so pick their brains, ask some questions, talk about the innovations that you've been thinking about, and ask about the next steps. And I get to play Donahue. I just want to make sure, panelists, make sure the microphones are actually turned on.
Hello?
I think they're off at the...
Hello? No?
So, are there any questions?
So I'm curious to know, how has entrepreneurship shaped your openness of sharing product ideas with industry?
Go ahead.
So I want to make sure we're on. When we were talking about intellectual property and not sharing your idea. So as an academic, that's what you do. You go out and you share everything, right? You publish, you do abstracts, you go to conferences, and you just talk to people. And it took a lot of reframing for me to share in a way that I wasn't giving everything away, but still developing a rapport and communication with scientists and others. So I think it is, you can be open and talk about your innovation without giving it away. And it's just there's a skill. It's something you can learn.
I would piggytail on that. We do that when we go to conferences and we present a research study. You don't present all the data because then even if somebody took it and tried to steal it, they wouldn't have your special sauce, if you will. They wouldn't have the complete picture.
I'd like to add a little more to that. I totally agree with what they said. But the non-disclosures, you mentioned them, right? Signing confidentiality agreements when talking with people in the industry. So I also have several. Every time someone's interested, we sign that from the start. But they scare me. I don't know that I trust their power. I signed one with NaviHealth. I sat down with them, several meetings with them, talked about our new algorithm, showed them what was in it. Did not disclose everything because I'm not that dumb. But in the end, when they decide that we can't go forward with it because, it's too hard to install in multiple EHRs, I start to wonder, geez, I hope I didn't tell them too much. Yeah. And then I hear that they're working on it themselves. All right. So what do I do? Do I go sue them? I mean, what power do you have? So you do have to be very careful. And I don't think that, I really, in the end, don't think they're going to be able to do it on their own. They're a bunch of data scientists and not clinicians. And so to know to the right questions to ask and how to measure things and how to work with clinicians to get it used in practice, all of that, requires us as clinicians to be on the team. So, but it is a big concern. It's a really good question.
Hi, thank you so much, all of you guys. You were great. I have a few questions. So I developed an app at a hackathon, and the app was really successful. So how do you go about disclosing and moving forward with development in those kinds of settings? Because those settings are designed for tech innovation and moving forward with kind of incorporating other disciplines into what you're doing. But at a certain point, we won the hackathon, so we won, so that's great. But there was a vested interest in what we were doing. So how do you move about disclosing, and how do you gain ground in developing and continuing to develop your app without so much focusing on the research of what you're doing versus actually applying and kind of seeing how successful it really can be?
So if your idea gets out there, then you need to be first to market for your competitive advantage is being first to market. So you got to get out there fast before anybody else creates it. That would be my advice.
I think she's also asking, what would be your next step? You've got this now. What do I do next? Is that what you're asking? Are you affiliated with the university? Can you go and use those resources?
So I was at the time because I was a graduate student, but I graduated since, so it was really only a year or so ago. But I've tested the app and go through multiple iterations, which I'm currently doing now. So I guess it's more so just about marketability and funding.
Yeah, and exposure, getting someone to pick up the license on it. Yeah. Look for Look for an incubator. I was going to say that just as she reminded me. Look for local incubators within the city that would have the resources to help you as well.
No, they'll take something in return.
Yeah.
They'll take some equity, and you just have to do that calculation, and sometimes it's worth it, and then you go for it.
Okay. And
there is actually a great incubator here in Cleveland, and it is statewide. There's also, I can't think of the name of it right now, but it is within the Case Western. It's kind of within Case Western, but also sits outside of Case Western in the state of Ohio. Ohio Third Frontier, is that what it is? So there are definitely places that you can, get the conversation started, and they'll help you put together this team and help you think of what your next step Yep, it's not really that. Help you think of what your next step would be. So the incubators are a great suggestion.
Okay. And just last question. So how do you guys stay motivated to kind of keep coming up with those ideas and actually churning out and applying it?
So I will say for me, it has nothing to do with my professional life, but everything to do with bolstering creativity. So I am creative by nature, and I recognize that when I'm not supporting my creative side, my ideas are terrible. So I do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of creating art. I love flowers. I'm out picking flowers. I garden. You're talking about, as an innovator, you're talking about creativity. And so there are really, you really have to embrace your inner creativity and find ways to do that. That's how I stay in that space.
No, you're looking at me. I guess I'm on that treadmill of the academic promotion tenure thing. So, and then when I started Right Care, I was already tenured, and now I'm a full professor. So I really don't have anything else to prove, but it's in my bones that I work that hard, and I'm into producing science and disseminating that science. And I think it's really important that, we're not funding studies with taxpayer dollars that just get put into one journal and nothing ever happens with them. I feel we have an obligation to translate them into practice, and that what we do fund and what we do in our research should have an application, should be meaningful.
Dr. Bowles, on your last comments, but this is to all of you. Okay, so the conflict of interest that I didn't hear directly discussed. We talked about having to work this out with your angel investors. When you get to venture capital, sort of thinking in my mind, different people have different return on investment that's acceptable for them, for what they're going to do with their capital, things like that. Let me take it back a step. The university. If you're a W-2 employee of this university, you've made covenants to this university. Talk to me about, we assume that they have a piece in this. Is there a point where you choose not to have a piece of the university involved, and what went into that thinking?
So before I made my disclosure and started talking to other professors, I went to some engineering professors and said, what are the pros and cons? You don't even have to tell them your idea. They said, well, you could go with this university, and here are the terms, or you could go with that university down the street, and there would be better terms. But there are pros and cons of that too, because then my resources would be far afield. They wouldn't be at my university. I also I had every right to just go create this innovation myself on my own time, and I didn't have $10,000 for a lawyer to start. And that was the fiscal reality of it. There are also places, when you've got CNN on, they say, tell us your invention and we'll take it to market for you. I've explored those too, on a number of occasions. So again, everything has its pros and cons. It's what risk are you willing to take? What control are you willing to give up? And if you're not, then you got to take it to market yourself.
And I think when you are an academic and you create a technology and you disclose that technology to university, your university actually owns the IP. You as an inventor do not. And so what we did in Valtari, when we spun out Valtari, I left my university role and we had to license that technology into Valtari. So it's owned by the university, but we've licensed that in Valtari to work on it. So essentially, it really depends on where you've created the intellectual property. If you've done it on your own time, then you can facilitate this on your own, but you have to be really careful in an academic unit if, even though you say you have a day a week, you can do consulting work and all these things, if you create IP that looks similar to what you do as an academic that you're getting paid to do, you really don't own any of that. So it's really going to come down to that conversation about when did you do it, what resources did you use to create the intellectual property, and can you really say that this doesn't look like anything you do in your day job?
Exactly. Yeah, you're seen as an employee, and if you invent something while you're an employee, then your employer owns it. Building on this, I'd like to add, when you do have an invention as an employee of a university, and they do own it, be smart about exploring your options. So as Jennifer said, you can license it from the university and start your own company outside. And the advantage to that is, so when we started Right Care within the university. And so right away, when we founded that company, Penn owned 49% of it, and I owned 51% of it. All right, from the start. If I had known, if I was smarter, if I had, I was just naive. I walked over there, thought that office is there to help faculty start businesses. So just walked over and, saw what they had. And before you know it, they were putting papers in front of me and I was signing them and off we went. And later then I learned that I had the option to license it and start this business on my own. And, I had Eric, and I could have done it with Eric and his colleagues easily on our own. We didn't really need the university. So big lesson learned there. And then, also look at what the split is. So that 51-49 is very greedy. Penn was very greedy. Other universities, it varies. So see what Case Western's is. Places like Stanford, it's very low, like 20%, or I don't even, maybe less than that. They want their faculty to start businesses because then, all their buildings on campus are named by all these startups that they helped cultivate. So they have a different approach to it. That was a while ago, 2011. So Penn has changed their policies since then, and they are much more reasonable now. But I'm under the old, and so that's how it remains. And then beyond the split, when you start the business, is the royalty agreement as well. And so that royalty agreement, every time Right Care sold the product to a hospital, the university gets royalties, my lab gets royalties, I personally get them, my co-inventor, Mary Naylor, gets them, and my school gets them. But the percentage is the university takes 80% of the royalties first, and then those 20% are divided among all those other entities. And again, that's like read the fine print of what the deal is. So if you're licensing your product, did they give you a reasonable deal?
We did get a pretty reasonable deal. So, and I will say this, so I'm at West Virginia University. We spun out of West Virginia University. We are the second company to spin out of that university. So
Jeez.
We were able to, and I actually had a CEO that knew what I did not, because I was very naive in the process. And so we negotiated really hard and we got a really good deal. So even when it comes down to the royalty streams and all of those components, so it really is negotiable. You have to, sometimes these universities don't like to negotiate. But when you have, if you don't know and you're new at this and you're just kind of, okay, where do I start? The number one thing I would have done better is to get legal counsel earlier for myself, not just for the company, but for myself. And there's lots of reasons why that's important, because you're managing conflicts, you're managing runway, you're managing royalty streams, inventorship, you're managing your role in the company. So it's legal counsel first. And so tech transfer office, number one, legal counsel, number two.
And I also just want to do a follow-up on her chunking her company up. That was part of our calculation, is for us to go get the first round of investment and the ROI and the deliverables that were going to be required in the timeline that was necessary for that $400,000. It was like, we can't build this in America and make this work. And that was frustrating. But the other thing that happens is when you've got an idea, you will have a flood of people and everybody wants a little equity. Be cautious of that. Step back and say, what are you going to do for it? Because everybody would love a piece of your company for very little effort. And you want to keep it to the people who are vested and have skin in the game.
So we are on convertible note right now.
Can you repeat the question?
There are pros and cons to convertible debt, because there are also timelines to convertible debt. You have to have an equity deal or financing deal at some moment in time to pay back those investors. So, the reason why we chose convertible note was so that we could raise money quickly. And we didn't want to move into venture financing right away because you give away a lot of your company when you do that. So I think the downside to convertible note is your Series A investors don't like convertible note financing. So you're kind of like in this middle range. Okay, what do we do? Because if you're going to, the idea of convertible note is that your angel or seed investors give you a portion, give you money to start your company. They own then a portion of your company, and they expect a buyout or a way to get into Series A when you launch into Series A. So if you're going out and you're raising Series A money, and let's say $1 million of that has to be paid back to angel investors, a lot of Series A investors don't like that. So it's this balance of what are you putting on that convertible note? What are the terms of that note? Because you also then have to pay back not just the note, but you're paying back on top of that note, depending upon the terms. So it's these are things I didn't, this is a whole new language. So when we sat down and, we were talking about these things, that's why legal counsel and having somebody who knew the language was critical to our creation as a company.
That's why you need a strong team. And, you're not going to learn that in your PhD program.
No.
You're just not. Yeah. And any PhD program. But what I encourage you to do, I learned a lot of the basics by going to my state entrepreneurs conference. And you get all the entrepreneurs from the state in, and they've got the sessions that are learn what financing is, and you just start with the basics, and it's a really sort of safe space to be able to learn the basics so that you can just get into business 101.
So I hate to disrupt the dialogue a little bit. We just have one question left. I'll give it to Dr. Weber, and we'll have to close here.
Oh man, I had so many, but
Just roll them into each other.
yeah. Your stories are really almost like Cinderella stories, and they're so inspirational. But I've heard a lot of stories where things have gone wrong, and so I'm a worrier. And a couple of things I worry about is, if I start my idea in one university and I'm married to that, how difficult will it be for me to move if I have like some really cool opportunities at another university and I want to stay academic? And then I've heard of people who do license their product or sell it, and then the company just mismanages and it collapses, but there's still that great need there. And so how do you take it back or just figure out how to keep going? And then the third, sorry, I'll roll into one, is, most of us have ideas on how to make things better. So how do you, if you sell it to someone or license it, do you then take away that control? And I'm a worrier. Okay, so yeah, if you could just address those, that'd be great.
Really good ones. They're good ones. So I have a quick, and then maybe we each can address this. The moving piece is easy. Then where you would move to, that university would license that technology from your university, and you would be working together. Definitely doable. People do it all the time. So you're not married to your institution, even though that institution would own the IP. You would move into this new institution and license that technology. No, you're just licensing it at that point. So you're paying to work on this at your new university, and the university would likely pay that money if they want you bad enough. So it's really this question of, those are details that can be identified, and you negotiate it in your startup package. Exactly, that's an easy one. The shelving of the technology is a big deal, and it happens all the time. Timing is important. You have to sell it or get acquired at the right time. If you do it too early, it'll get shelved. If you sell it when it's not ready, it'll get shelved. But then you can also, in component, like with that shelving and control, part of the acquisition could be that you stay on as a consultant. Or part of the acquisition or the sell is that you still are involved in the management and you don't sell it otherwise. So not all money is good money. Not all money is good money. You have to pick good money. And you determine what you mean by good money.
That's your control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
bring everything to a close, and I've been particularly inspired and thankful for the knowledge that all three, or actually all four of our panelists were able to share, but quite impressed with our esteemed nursing panelists this afternoon. So I want to give them a round of applause. And I'm hopefully alignment to this week's theme, nurses inspire, influence, and innovate. Hopefully you've been inspired. Hopefully you will consider innovating so that we can go out and have greater impact or influence. Thank you.